Even for those of you who have never played Baldur's Gate 3, you probably know a lot about the Druid's Grove and Goblin Camp from Act 1. And that's because there have been hundreds of videos all about the different things you can do to help either side all over YouTube and TikTok. Varying from turning the Druid's Grove against the Tieflings and causing a race war, systematically picking off goblin leaders one by one from the shadows, or even lining up mile-long trails of explosive barrels and setting them all off at once, killing everyone. But there's one smaller interaction, so rare that I am confident almost none of you have ever actually experienced it yourself. You see, if you side with the Grove during your time in Act 1, you will be tasked with saving their leader Halsin and taking out each of the goblin leaders so that the goblins themselves become unorganized and disperse. It turns out to be a pretty foolproof plan if executed correctly, and results in both the druids and tieflings amicably parting ways and surviving into future acts where they once again will need your help. But for almost any player that goes this route, you will likely bring your entire party to the goblin camp to fight the leaders when the time comes. After all, why would you not? There's no reason to leave one person back at the druid camp while the rest fight the goblins. However, if for whatever reason you do this, you are met with one of the rarest and least well-known cutscenes in the entire game. Within moments of killing the third goblin leader, you will immediately be pulled away to your companion or companions sitting back at the Druid's Grove, talking with a mysterious NPC that we have never seen before named Garrison the Bent. Garrison excitedly exclaims that scouts nearby have reported that the goblins have been neutralized, and that the way is now clear for everyone to walk to Baldur's Gate. But hold up, how on earth could this mysterious man know anything about this? He claims that scouts have made the reports, but considering that we quite literally just killed the final goblin leader mere milliseconds ago, it doesn't make any logical sense that this could happen. So why does this man actually know this then? And even more horrifying, who is this man? You can spend hours combing through every single inch of the Druid Grove before, after, and during your fight with the goblins, and you will never find any sign of Garrison either existing or being talked about or written about by anyone close by or far away for that matter. He has no history, no backstory, no friends, no family, no quest, and absolutely not a single reference to him in the entire game outside of this very short and very rare cutscene. And while it seems clear that he is simply nothing more than a backup NPC that's supposed to make the transition from the Grove from its usual state to that of leaving makes sense for players that do leave any companions in the Grove as the goblins fall, but even then, if that's the case, why not just have someone like Zevlar tell you this? He already knows everyone in the party, you've talked to him multiple times and helped him out, and it would just make the most sense for someone like him to let you know this, considering he's usually the first person you speak to on your return to the Grove on normal playthroughs. So could it be that there really is something more sinister and crazy going on here? We are talking about a person that has never been seen before with absolutely no one else aware of his presence. A man who through some sort of omnipotence knows when something has happened miles away the second it happens, and a tiefling who is sporting suspiciously large horns. Maybe, just maybe, there is more going on here than meets the eye. Potentially Garrison is actually Raphael in disguise, or another being entirely watching over us on our journeys with some nefarious goal in mind. Either way though, I think something more is going on with Garrison the Bent. After all, even his name, the Bent, is a common slang term used to describe people who are liars and hiding something, often evil. Maybe our true enemy the entire time was not the Emperor or Elderbrain, but one tiefling with an especially good mustache. In pretty much any game I play, one of my favorite builds to go if possible is the Summoner. There's just something about creating an army of underlings to do everything for you and sitting back while they fight that makes my inner capitalist smile. And because of that, one of my favorite interactions in all of Baldur's Gate 3 comes from Sovereign Glut, a rather plump myconid who you can find deep in the Underdark in their colony. Glut has a special spell called Animating Spores, which allows you to reanimate any monstrosity type creature you have slain as a spore servant that follows your every command and will fight to the bitter end in battle. This means you can choose from a whole assortment of different creatures to come to your aid, even including the fearsome Boulette, which burrows underground in the region and is very tough to kill if you aren't prepared. On top of this too, Glut himself has a pretty cool questline to hunt down some Dwergar, and you can even work with him to backstab the colony he is a part of to gain more power for yourself or tell him to bugger off. Regardless though, far and away the part everyone remembers about Glut is this spell. But what a lot of players don't know is how much it actually works on. You can raise harpies, gnolls, cats, wargs, ettercaps, and even the mighty minotaurs. But far and away the least well-known thing you can reanimate, and maybe the coolest, are the mimic chests. If you manage to spot one of these on your journeys later in the game, say in Act 2 or 3, and slay it, if any of your characters have extremely high strength stats and an empty inventory, they can actually pick up the entire dead body and hold it. If you then take the body of the chest with you back to the Underdark and to Glut, you can reanimate the body, and boom, you suddenly have a massive chest following you around with a gargantuan tongue it can use to slap people. It's one of the coolest interactions in the whole game, albeit one of the most ridiculous, and goes to show why systematic first game design is so important. I mentioned it in my original Baldur's Gate 3 review on release and also in my Every RPG Ever ranked video, but what I personally think makes Baldur's Gate so special in the first place is it's essentially an immersive sim, where systematic designs and approaches to how the game is played lead to interactions like the undead mimic chest, where things that sound amazing on paper but usually aren't possible in other games suddenly are commonplace in an RPG epic like Baldur's Gate 3. I mentioned earlier on this list how the Speak with the Dead spell in Baldur's Gate 3 has some of the coolest interactions out there. And in terms of this, another we have to touch on comes from a big moment in Act 3. Gortash, one of the 3 leaders of the enigmatic cult of the Absolute, and chosen of Bane himself, god of tyranny and lord of darkness, is a man on the verge of becoming the Archduke of the city of Baldur's Gate, and as such, would wield immense power to do evil. So as you would expect, most players at some point through a myriad of means will find a way to kill Gortash, eventually resulting in the player character and companions standing over his lifeless body, full of joy knowing the citizens of the city are that much closer to being safe. But you see, there's actually a very strange interaction here that a lot of players don't know about. You would expect to be able to cast Speak with the Dead on such an important individual, and when you do, you would also expect to hear him speak. But in the case of Gortash, you are met with a different, much more sinister voice, that of Bane.
And so it is for you. You make me eternal.
He laughs and quickly informs you that Gortash is now his, and will forever be tortured for his failings. But if you press further, you can actually learn more about Bane and his plans as well. For example, when asking about why Bane allied himself with Ball and Merkel, he explains that only by making them allies did he guarantee they were not foes, implying some deeper meanings behind their entire alliance. And overall, I just thought it was a really cool interaction that I had no idea was in the game, and it makes you wonder what other bodies might be out there we still need to speak to learn more. I think we can all agree that after Baldur's Gate 3, pretty much anything Larian Studios works on next will have the world watching. But luckily for us, while we sit and wait for the inevitable announcement of what this coming game will be, we might be able to get some hints from Baldur's Gate 3 itself. For those of you who don't know, Larian Studios has a history of adding little Easter eggs for their next game in each previous one, and there is one specific book that might be our best guess for the next big Larian IP. Called Therapeutics, this small novel found in the House of Healing in Act 2 contains excerpts from an oneromancer who has seen a vision of something truly spectacular. In the Forgotten Realms, oneromancers are individuals with the ability to interpret dreams and use them to form magics. And in this volume, we read about an individual who consumes a strange hallucinogenic, which sends them into an outrageous and otherworldly dream, which they then paint out on a canvas in front of them as it happens. These drawings in the novel are described as the following: weird lumbering shapes sailing over cities, metal windmills attached to their sides, and here, oblongs fitted with wheels tearing locomotives across a track, and here, a mechanized person waving directly at the viewer. Immediately, this doesn't resemble anything we can readily find in the Forgotten Realms setting, because despite some areas in the canon lore going through an industrial revolution of sorts, nothing comes close to the flying blimp-like machines described here. In fact, something like that sounds more akin to a steampunk setting like, say, Arcanum or Clockwork Revolution than anything in fantasy. And well, that might be because this could be Larian's big hint at what their next game will be. And personally, I think that sounds amazing. I've always been a bigger fan of sci-fi than fantasy, but if I'm being honest, it's so seldom that science fiction is actually pulled off well in games. But if anyone can do it, it's Larian. And a big budget steampunk or sci-fi RPG with immersive sim design approaches pretty much sounds like my ideal dream game, and probably a lot of your guys's too. There are some other theories about what their next game could be as well, including Divinity Original Sin 3, due to books we can find in the game that give reference to Tarkin, a mad scientist from Divinity Original Sin 2 who gave us hints about Baldur's Gate 3 in that game. But truthfully, I really hope that isn't the case. As someone that personally loves Divinity Original Sin 2, I just think a science fiction setting would be so much more interesting, and also allow Larian to flex their creative muscles a bit more. But nonetheless, whatever the next game does turn out to be, I will be there day one to support and play whatever this studio has been working on for years, ready to form my own opinions on whatever they turn out to be. One of the biggest draws for many Baldur's Gate 3 players is the companions and their voluptuous romances. But for me, if I'm being honest, the companions and how unrelentingly horny they are is actually one of my biggest criticisms of the game. It feels like no matter what you do, every companion is down at all times, and they start to feel less like people and more like objectified sex dolls because of it. Regardless though, some of the companion quests and romances still have some really awesome moments, taking us to new places with varied cutscenes we wouldn't see otherwise, and giving us more background on the people we talk to constantly back at camp. However, there is one romance scene, with Karlach specifically, that has an interaction most of the community has no idea about. Early on in Act 3, you get a chance to take Karlach out on your guys' first date, and the venue of choice is none other than the Singing Lute, a local bar and restaurant located in the lower city that is preceded over by Tender Hank, a slender half-orc with a lovable smile. But the thing is, as with all quests or interactions in Baldur's Gate, because of the freedom you are given at all times, you can actually kill Hank before this moment even happens. All across the game, Larian provides contingency plans for cases like this, substituting one NPC for another or changing how things play out. But in the case of this date with Karlach, should you kill Hank, there, as far as you know, is no one else to fill the spot. That is until you actually get to the date itself though, where another, suspiciously similar looking half-orc named Honk steps in. The interaction and dialogue plays out exactly the same as before, with the only difference being Karlach saying a different name. It's one of the least well-known interactions in the entire act, and almost no players will ever actually see this, but some in the community have begun to wonder if a lot more than meets the eye is going on here. First of all, Hank and Honk both have almost identical face models in-game, with the same teeth, nose, and eyes. And on top of this, on Hank's body, if you do kill him, you can find a note from Honk asking him to read it. But if you actually read the note, which simply states, "Do loot in kitchen when closed," it almost sounds more like a code phrase than an actual letter. Could it be that Honk and Hank are actually the same person? Or maybe even clones of the same half-orc, an experiment of sorts being conducted by a mad scientist hidden in Baldur's Gate, who behind the scenes is running the Singing Lute and replacing any of its killed henchmen with a clone of one unlucky half-orc. Honestly, probably not, and this is likely just Hank's brother who's taken his place while he's gone. But considering that this NPC didn't even exist in the wiki for months after release, and for a long time was considered a folktale, maybe there is a lot more going on here than we originally thought. And potentially, years from now, the truth behind this clone army could be revealed. One of the hardest parts about making a sequel to a beloved and old series is bringing back well-known characters and making them work. And in the case of Baldur's Gate 3, there are tons of returning cast members to take a look at, spread between companions, quest givers, and maybe most prominently of all, the literal antagonist of the first game, Sarevok Onchev. This chaotic evil human Deathbringer is a ball spawn, a mortal child sired by the god of murder, Baal, who in the original games tries to become the literal reincarnation of Baal himself by murdering all those who stand in his path. He's a fan-favorite character for a reason, and even a decade after starring in his first game, essays are being written about what made him great. But you see, as would be expected, bringing this legend back for a cameo in Act 3 of Baldur's Gate 3 was bound to leave some in the community with a sour taste in their mouth. And that's because the Sarevok we see in Baldur's Gate 3 for a lot of people just doesn't feel quite right. The original Sarevok in the old games was a spawn of Baal, and while in many ways he did serve Baal's teachings, he was still his own character, with his own desires for power and desires outside of serving his father. But in Baldur's Gate 3, this version of Sarevok seems to serve Baal in a much more religious manner. And this is only more unnerving if you count the fact that in the Throne of Baal DLC for Baldur's Gate 2, you can actually redeem Sarevok and bring him back to the light, stripping away his devotion to the god of murder entirely. So this then begs the question, what is going on with Sarevok in Baldur's Gate 3 then? Well, some especially observant community members noticed that early on in Baldur's Gate 3, you can find a book titled Disorders of the Nerves and Mind, a treatise which details the ramblings of a man who apparently found a book which convinced him he was actually Sarevok. The book somehow, without the use of magic, was able to literally convince random people that they are the Lord of Murder's own destined spawn. And even more hauntingly, based on some of the passages, it's heavily implied that these scriptures could be written by devout Baalists who might be trying to lead more people to join the cause. Could it be that in an attempt to bring back favor to their god of murder, these Baalists created books that would give rise to someone who would see themselves as Sarevok himself and take his place to help push the Baalist agenda forward? It's a pretty far-fetched idea, especially when we consider companions like Jaheira can talk to this Sarevok in-game for some time and don't mention any red flags, as well as the fact that playing as the Dark Urge means you will get custom dialogue with Baal that imply this is the real Sarevok. But potentially, somehow, some way, this man we come into contact to in Baldur's Gate 3 is not the real one we met so many years ago. And that might explain why something about him just isn't the same, and he isn't reacting to things that happened before. Because after all, it's hard to pull any characters like this off so many years after their first conceptualization. If given a choice to pick one main leader of the Cult of the Absolute from Baldur's Gate 3, most people would probably go for Ketheric Thorm. And that's because Ketheric really embodies the feel of a villain. He's gregarious, brooding, and heroic in his own evil way, trying to avenge the death of his beloved daughter. And throughout all of Act 2, he serves as the clear antagonist, who is leading a literal army that will soon descend onto Baldur's Gate and take the city, and on top of this, he has immortality on his side as well. It all comes together to make him a pretty terrifying and interesting villain. And because of that, when you get to Act 3 and find no one even close in stature, it can feel kind of weird or off-putting. But what if I told you that out of the Dead Threes chosen, the leaders of the Cult of the Absolute, Gortash is far and away the real leader behind everything? And that essentially, the other two don't matter at all. First of all, if you actually study the three cult leaders, that being Ketheric, Gortash, and Orin, Gortash seems like the only one genuinely doing anything. While Ketheric is serving as a puppet leader to lead a fake invasion on Baldur's Gate, and Orin is out murdering people on the streets to cause chaos, Gortash is always behind the scenes plotting the next move. After all, the Cult of the Absolute's end goal is to cause chaos in the city, after which Lord Gortash can ascend to the throne and command an army of thralls under the Elder Brain, after which the Dead Three can move on to take over the rest of the world. But to even do this in the first place, the Dead Three had to come up with a way to gain followers, true souls. And well, Gortash is the person who went through all the trouble to even make True Souls a reality in the first place, by commanding the power of the Illithid tadpoles to mind control individuals. On top of this, Gortash is the creator of the Steel Watch, massive mechanical soldiers who patrol the city of Baldur's Gate, who were made through combining of Mind Flare and Infernal technology, which he likely garnered by signing a pact with the Archdevil Zariel and handing over Karlach. So in essence, Gortash is not only the creator of True Souls, the entire basis of the Cult of the Absolute's army and power, but he also created the Steel Watch, the entire second hand of their military force. And that's not even to mention the fact that to do all of this, presumably Gortash was arranging agreements and pacts with multiple interplanar demons and beings alike. And before any of this even happened, he worked his way through the ranks of Baldur's Gate elites to become a lord himself, where he had to keep face and hide his true intentions every step of the way. Or in other words, pretty much every event in the main story, each encampment you encounter, every person, race, or monster you find has in some way been touched by this man. And if you play as the Dark Urge, when you first meet Gortash, you will find out that you also used to be buddies, and he was planning with you years ago and knew everything would happen well before it did. There's no two ways about it. Envir Gortash is a genius. Evil, but a genius. And without him, there simply is no Cult of the Absolute, there is no Dead 3, no reascension of the gods of tyranny, murder, and death. In a way, he serves as the guiding force behind everything bad that has happened in-game. And it's surprising too because for a lot of players, myself included, he felt like kind of a letdown in Act 3 initially. For such a powerful and influential man, he could have been used in much more interesting ways. But maybe that's because the true most powerful and evil being, the one pulling the strings behind everything the entire time,